Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. If you're tired of failure, Olivia Smith says, just write a new story. Olivia, thanks for being with us today. Fill us in a little bit about your background.
My background started with nursing. I became a registered nurse and thought that's what I was going to do for my lifelong career. And then the business world grabbed me. So I became a stay-at-home mom. And during the few years that I was at home with my small children, I came up with an idea for a product. And the product was test marketed in a few local stores, and it sort of took off. And so I was left to figure out how to really start and run this company. From having a nursing background, I did not have a business background, didn't know what a sales rep was, didn't really know anything about the business world. So I took this idea and over the next 15 years, turned it into a multi-million-dollar company and had a really good run with that and enjoyed it. And then closed that company in 2010 and stayed in the business world, did some accounting work. And it was during that period of time that I started volunteering at the Tennessee Prison for Women.
This is definitely a different backstory than we usually hear, but what experience?
Yes,
tell us about that quickly.
So I was just feeling sort of dry, I'd been working my whole career, had not really done any significant giving back. So I just felt led to do this volunteer experience at the prison. And this experience involved teaching an inmate one-on-one a course on decision making. And so I was paired with a woman named Stacy. I did about 3 rounds of this teaching. This was my 3rd teaching round, and I was paired with Stacy, and Stacy shared her life story with me, and it changed my life. Stacy was trying to write a new story for her life. She was going to be getting out soon, and I sort of went into fast track mode. How is a girl like this going to exit prison? She has no money. She has no family. She wants to start her life over in Nashville. How is she possibly going to do that? It seemed impossible to me. So I started researching and investigating local resources. And long story short, I ended up founding a nonprofit that is now in its 6th year of business. And we've helped around 200 women. It's called Healing Housing. And it is for women in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. So Stacy was in prison on a drug conviction. And so that was what sort of spurred my interest in what women who are either exiting prison or exiting treatment from drug and alcohol addiction, where do they go? How do they turn their lives around when they don't have financial resources and a family to support them? So Healing Housing was founded, and we serve a population of women that don't have any financial resources. Our mission was to serve those who literally have nothing and to help lift them up and give them a hand up so that they can be housed and have programming surrounding them that will allow them to be able to turn their lives around, that they have to do the hard work and are responsible for getting a job. And there's a lot that goes into their recovery, but we have built this up and it's very successful, and we've helped almost 200 women to this point. So at the point where I got the nonprofit really up and on a solid foundation, I stepped away from the leadership of that, turned that over to someone who's actually in recovery. And then I stepped out back into the business world and began this consulting journey called Write a New Story, where I help other entrepreneurs that are starting their journey hopefully write their new story of entrepreneurship and success.
Well, that's a great title. Already you've given us a history and a very interesting background of helping people, working with them. But I love that title, Write a New Story. And did you come up with it? Did someone say, I'm just going to write a new story, and bingo, that, the lights went off?
I came up with it thinking in terms of the consulting company and what my goal was. It was really that that simple phrase, help others write their new story of business, entrepreneurship, and success. I knew that I had many chapters in my story as my story had unfolded. And so I saw an opportunity to step into other people's stories and help them write a new story for their own business life and personal life as well.
Now, what type of clients do you seek out for consulting and coaching, and who's the typical client that would come to you for help?
The typical client is a business owner who's been in business anywhere from 2 or 3 years to 10 years and beyond, who are, experiencing the typical growing pains of trying to run a company. They are alone. They don't have anybody to talk to. You can't really talk to your employees about your business issues. Your spouse or partner typically doesn't really have the information needed in order to really help you in a substantial way. And so many business owners find themselves, I call it business owners island. They're on an island by themselves with really nowhere to turn in terms of getting sound business advice. And so they will seek me out, and we enter a consulting coaching arrangement where we meet usually twice a month for 2 hours at a time and work through kind of building that solid business foundation. Even if a business owner has been in business 10 or 15 years, there are cracks in the foundation. The way you're doing business now needs to look very different than the way you were doing business 10 years ago. And many times business owners get caught in that trap of working in their business, and they don't lift their heads up and look down and have a bird's eye view to work on their business. And so we really focus on our time together is really all about who they are, where they're trying to go, what their goals are, and building a company that reflects all of that so that we have the systems and the processes and the right people in the right seats on the bus so they can accomplish what they want with their business and then serve their personal aim, personal goals.
Can you give us an idea of some of the types of businesses? You don't have to be specific. We don't want to break any confidences. But are you working with like a dental office, a law firm, a manufacturer, a retail shop, a restaurant?
So all of the above, all of those types of people I have helped. Attorneys, it could be an attorney practice, it could be a manufacturing company, real estate agent. I've sort of have a smattering of clients because really at the end of the day, 80% of someone's business problems doesn't really matter what industry they're in. They're usually the same type of problem. So only 10 to 15% is really industry specific. So it doesn't matter to me what industry someone is in. I don't have to have expertise in that. Really, what I've got expertise in is helping them, number one, transform themselves, looking at who they are as a leader, why that's important, how understanding who you are affects how you scale your company and who you surround yourself with. And then after sort of getting them properly situated and understanding who they are, then we start talking about the others that they're working with, making sure we've got people in the right places at the company. And beyond that, it's systems and processes and just good, sound business principles.
Now, you've given us an extensive background, but if I called you and I said, I'm looking for a consultant and I'm calling 5 in the yellow pages today and I get you on, how would you tell me you're different? Why should I pick you rather than one of your competitors? Because
I've sat in your shoes. There are a lot of consultants out there that are consulting and they've never run a business, built a business, sat in the owner's shoes. And I've lived everything you're going to tell me about. I've lived it. And I've lived the nights, am I going to make payroll tomorrow? Am I going to have to let somebody go? How am I going to make this new hire? Am I hiring the right person? All of the things that the business owner is facing and dealing with on a daily basis, I've lived it and shed their tears and sweated their sweat. And there's nothing you can tell me that I haven't been through. And so I stand in that expertise as the background for my consulting.
And that's a great answer because it's easy for the college professor or the teacher or, someone up in front in a seminar to give us rules for life and how to do things. But have they really been there and have they done that? Does it work in the real world?
That's exactly right.
You have been.
That's exactly right.
And you would get me with that. I would stop with the phone call to you and we would be signing the contract in a few hours afterward. Excuse me, Olivia, before we go further, we'd like to let our audience know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Olivia Smith. She is the founder of Write a New Story. And Olivia, for our audience, we're going to ask you, is there a website where we can find out more information?
Yes, it's writeanewstory.com. And that has all of the information about my consulting practice and who I am and my background. That's a great place to start.
And we'll give that information again later in the show if anyone didn't get it down. But if you're having trouble with your business, this might be just that right person to talk to. And as Olivia said, she's been there, she's done that, she's gone through it already. So why reinvent the wheel? Olivia, are there some typical business issues that you just keep seeing? I mean, we all do in certain businesses. I'm sure the auto mechanic sees certain problems come up because of the way we treat our car. Are there certain things that keep coming up that you keep seeing, and either mistakes or things that people overlook?
The answer is absolutely yes. And the biggest, probably wouldn't call it mistake, the biggest issue I see is with the business owner themselves. If you've ever heard the phrase, the fish stinks from the head down,
Okay.
If the company's a mess, usually it's because the owner's a mess. And so that's why I start every consulting engagement starts with a breakdown of who the owner is, actually do a behavioral assessment on the owner and review, have a 2-hour debrief with them on their results. And we really that's the beginning of my process, is really understanding who they are as a person naturally, what's happening to them when they get to work, and how all those pieces fit together. And we spend multiple sessions just on them, because until I can get them straight, until they understand kind of where they're going off course, we can't look and diagnose the other problems that are going on in the company, because so many things key off of that owner and how they're showing up, how they're behaving, how others are perceiving them. It's key in how that company's being run. And so until we can dig in and kind of get them going on the right path, it's very difficult to address the other issues in the company.
I think that's great, but I'm sitting here thinking myself, if I started a restaurant and I want some help from you, or an accounting firm, if you tell me something negative about myself, I feel a little hurt. I'm knocked back a little bit. I know it's in the end it's going to be good for me, but do you find clients take that as an insult to them and say, I'm a wealthy guy, or I'm a wealthy woman who started this company, I have 100 employees, I can't be that bad?
So we don't talk about things as being bad. When we look at the results, we talk about opportunity. We all have areas where we can work on. And so I don't really see challenges. I see opportunities. When I see the results, that's how we talk about them as well. Look at what you've built. Look at what you've got. Look at the opportunity there is to take it even further. And let's talk about where those opportunities are.
Now I can see why you're so good at what you do, because you know how to present it. You know how to reach into the people. How long a time does a client work with you? Is this like taking a college course? We take it either at 6 months, or if you're taking several courses in an area, it might be 2 years, 4 years.
So typically what I recommend is we start with a 6-month engagement. And like I said, that's really only 24 hours. If you meet with someone twice a month for 2 hours, when you think about it in the length of time you've actually met with that person, that's only a day over the course of 6 months. So that's usually what I recommend as our starting point. And then we certainly reassess as we get close to that 6-month point. Are we accomplishing what we set out to accomplish? How much more work is there to be done? So it's very individual in terms of what's needed and what they're wanting to accomplish.
I read in your notes something about a DISC, DISC, behavioral assessment. What is that, and why is it part of your consulting? So, as I stated earlier, the DISC assessment is the behavioral tool that I have chosen to use. I find it to be very simple, very straightforward, and easy for the client to understand as well. So I send the client just a link,
and they click the link. It takes them to an online assessment. It probably takes 10 to 15 minutes to complete the assessment. And then immediately the results are generated. And that, like I said, is our starting point for sitting down and beginning our conversation about who are you? How are you showing up? Who are you as a leader? And where are our opportunities to leverage all of what we're seeing to the good to build a company based on a solid foundation with you as leader, and then surrounding you with who you need to be surrounded with to be the most successful you can be.
Now, when they first hear this, what is the usual reaction? Is it, because we love the good things about us, that we're wonderful, we've done this, etc. But it can be 5% of them might be negative, and probably there is something with everybody that, and maybe a larger percentage. Is that hard to get through to an entrepreneur?
So the interesting thing, number one, when we go over their results, 99% of the time they say, wow, this is really accurate. So the first thing you want to do is establish, does this sound familiar? Does this sound like you? Do you agree with what the results are saying? Because it's a very extensive deep dive into who you are. So that's the first thing, is making sure that the entrepreneur, the owner, business owner agrees that this is a fair assessment of who they are. So based upon that, then you just start talking about how they profile out and what that looks like in terms of both their personal life and their business life. I mean, because this is how they're showing up to the world, not just the business world. This is kind of who they are. So understanding the baseline of who you are, then the second part of that is, what does the assessment say is happening to you when you get to work? It's called your adapted style. So when we adapt, which is basically when we're around other people, when we're not alone, we're in adaptive mode. What does that look like? And is it very different than who we are naturally? Because if you are one way naturally, and then all of a sudden you're showing up at work and you're this whole different person, which I see quite often, what's that about? Is that stress related? Is that what's causing this huge shift between who you are naturally and who you think you're supposed to be when you get to work? Because long term, if you're turning into a whole different person at work, that's exhausting. It will wear you out, and it's not a formula for success. And so that's really where the work begins. And so it's not a right or wrong. It's just, it is what it is. And it's a baseline for our conversation about, why are these things happening? What changes do you want to make, if any? And again, it's all opportunity.
This sounds fantastic, and you already have me interested in it. I'm thinking about it, and I'm saying, gee, for everybody, that would be interesting, for a teacher, for a minister, for a salesperson. Can you tell us, without going into specifics, we don't want you to break any confidences, but like, take a business that you've worked with recently and the person that you've worked with, what you learned through there, what they learned, and let's say over the first 6 months or year, the changes that came about and how they reacted.
Yes. So I have a really good example. I have a company I'm working with right now, and there are two partners, and they both did the assessment and then came in for the debrief, and they could not be more opposite in terms of their styles. And so, and of course, they sort of knew that. That wasn't a huge surprise. But as I listened to how they described how their working relationship was, one was very outspoken, very demonstrative, very controlling. The other was very submissive, very quiet, didn't speak up. And so as partners, that had started to present a problem, because the one that isn't as inclined to speak up felt like she was getting run over. She wasn't heard. And so, of course, you can't be partners long term and have that as the dynamic, or it'll fall apart. And so what we together have had to work on is, how does the one that's got the much stronger, by nature, just much stronger personality, mesh with someone who by nature is quiet, is not as outspoken, is conflict averse? And so how are you going to take these two very different, both very smart, very intelligent, gifted business people, but very different? How do they pull off working together successfully? And so the first step is bringing awareness to the situation. Here's what we've got. Here's how you're wired naturally. You're just different. And so that's okay. But what's that look like when we get into work and start having to really work together on a daily basis? And so both people had to recognize what was going on, the good parts of that and the not so good parts of that. And then what does the work look like to come more and meet more in the middle? How do we allow the one who's feeling unheard to be heard? And part of that responsibility is on her. If you keep sitting there and keep not saying anything, that's your fault. At some point, you got to own that and recognize that you've got responsibility in this to speak up, to be heard. It's not going to just happen. You have to take responsibility for that. And the other person has to increase their understanding of the partner that's not feeling heard, bringing awareness to that, recognizing that they need to be a better listener. And when the quieter partner does speak up, value that contribution. And so it's just a back and forth of learning about different styles, how people are showing up, and the value that both people bring to the table, and just making sure that everybody's able to allow all of that value to rise to the surface. And so I think we're all very good at kind of knowing who we are. Where it breaks down is we have no clue how we're being perceived by other people.
This is fantastic.
We just sort of go through the day and we just don't think about how we're being perceived. And it matters. It matters when you find out what your employees really think about you. And the way you think about yourself can be two completely different things. And it can be shocking. You're like, I had no idea this is what they were thinking.
I think Dr. Phil should have you on a show every day just as one of those consultants in the audience, because I think you'd do a great job with them. Olivia, before we go further, I want our audience to know, if you're just tuning in and listening to all this great information, we want you to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Olivia Smith, and her company is Write a New Story. And as you can see, she's a consultant. She works with businesses. She's been there. She's done that. Olivia, we're going to ask you also, can you give us the website where we can find out more information about you?
Yes, it's writeanewstory.com, WRITE, writeanewstory.com.
And it sounds fantastic. And I'm sure all of your clients literally do write a new story because they're getting this help and they're changing it from whatever is bringing them down. Now, even if it's not 100% movement, they're moving 40, 60, 80% toward whatever goal they want, whether it's more profits, more clients, expansion, et cetera, et cetera. You mentioned about that assessment. Do you recommend to your clients that their employees or close partners or leaders in the company also take that?
Absolutely. The first, and usually I don't have to recommend it. The owner, after they go through this process, typically asks me, how do I get this, how do I roll this out? Because what you're really trying to do, you don't want just the owner to transform. You're trying to bring transformation to the whole culture. And you've got to have everyone sort of having that baseline understanding of what all of this means in order to pull that off. And so, yes, the next step would be for sure to start with your key employees, get them profiled, sit down. I do team group workshops where we take the whole team and go through as a group the profiles, what it all means, and what that means for their team dynamic. How do we build a stronger team that communicates more effectively with each other? You have to think about employee turnover and why people leave. If you really get down to the base issue, it's typically communication. Every time. It's people problems and it's people not communicating. And that's so sad because it's very expensive to hire and invest in someone and to have them turn around and leave. People underestimate the drain on your finances with turnover. Employee turnover is very expensive. And so the goal here, if you can get the owner's buy-in on how transformative this process can be, then you roll it out with the employees. Now you're talking about making some cultural changes. And that goes straight to the heart of increasing revenue because you're increasing employee retention and effectiveness for the whole company.
Olivia, today, of course, we just got over the pandemic. We hope it's over, and we hope there's not a new problem coming up. But there always seems to be, and we seem to be alerted, of course, because of the availability of news, flashes, apps on our phone, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the biggest challenges your clients face that you see now and, let's say, going forward the next 6 to 18 months?
So I think particularly with the challenges of remote work versus in-person work, as the pandemic has ended and workforces find themselves in all kinds of different work arrangements. I think, again, back to the heart of the DISC assessment and what the goal of going through that process is how do you impact cultural communication and cultural change when you're not even all together anymore? You know, half of you are on Zoom and half of you are in the office. And I mean, it's particularly challenging. I think it can be done. I think there's just got to be a much more concerted effort surrounding how we're communicating, how often we're communicating. And I find out it's interesting. You talk to people and you say, well, how often are you all meeting? Well, we really don't have any set times that we meet. And I'm like, how do you expect to improve the atmosphere, the communication, the culture if you're not talking on a regular basis? And so I find that the remote working paired with it just has increased those challenges that were already there to begin with. I mean, these challenges existed when we all worked together, much less when you pull people apart and put them in different locations.
Olivia, you've been fantastic, and now I see why it's so important that you've been there, you've done this, you ran your own business, you were in nursing, you developed not-for-profits. Really, the advice you've given us is wonderful. I thank you very much. Before we wrap up, once again, I'd ask you to give us that website for our audience.
Yes, it's writeanewstory.com. And if you go to the website, you can take a quiz, a 2-question quiz, which is kind of a mini DISC. It's just 2 questions, and it will give you an immediate result predicting probably what your primary style is. And so for anyone who's interested in just learning, sticking a toe in the water, they can go to the website and take that 2-question quiz, and it will give them their primary style result. And if they're interested in learning more, they can contact me through the website, and I'd love to hear from them.
And that's Write a New Story, WRITE, correct?
Yes.
Okay, we want our audience to know that because I'm sure you're going to be hearing from many people after they listen to this show. Olivia, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's been a pleasure.
I'd like to let our audience know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.